Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Agatha All Along, episode 3. This one's called Through Many Miles of Tricks and Trials. So spoilers for the episode, and of course this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Alison for picking the show. This episode kind of like proves more or less what I thought it was going to be in some ways, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's definitely still a lot of opportunity to do just sort of fun stories about whatever the group of characters encounters. But I would say that this particular episode does fall into some tropes that I'm on a personal level, I'm not super fond of. You know, I'm a big horror movie watcher. I watch a lot of horror movies. We do a horror movie podcast over on the movie channel. And I get a little frustrated with supernatural horror movies who pull a lot of the same tricks over and over again. And there's a portion in the middle of this episode where they all have hallucinations, and I was kind of getting that feeling with that stuff, where it felt like a lot of easy, shortcut, kind of like, you know, we get to have random creepy scenes that don't really have much context around them. They're maybe revealing some things about the characters' backstories that we're going to delve into later, and I can appreciate that side of it, but I wasn't feeling all that like entertained by that portion of the events. I was just kind of annoyed. But there are some interesting stylistic choices in this episode, particularly when they go into their first trial, which presents itself as a nice house in a field, and they go in there. The aspect ratio changes, which I know everyone loves to hear me talk about, is when aspect ratios change. Because the show up until this point has been, you know, maybe it was different in episode 1. I can't remember because it was in the TV show. Maybe they had a different ratio for that as well. But it's been typically your wide movie ratio the whole time, the 2.391. But it switches to about 185 to 1 when they go into the house, and I realize this is boring everyone, and it's by far one of the most interesting things the episode does for me. But that was just curious. I wonder if like they'll all switch to that ratio whenever they go into like the trial when it's on its own little bubble like this one was. Or if they'll have different ratios, maybe one will be in black and white, which would kind of harken back to Wizard of Oz. No pun intended, because of Harkness, I did not mean that. But, you know, regardless, or sepia toned is maybe a more of an accurate reference to Wizard of Oz, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time. So, yeah, we have a death this episode, seemingly. I'm not convinced it's going to stick. For whatever reason, something just doesn't feel quite right about it. But the episode begins, they're on the road, they're debating what to do, they're kind of acknowledging the fact that one of them, Mrs. Hart, aka Sharon, is not really a witch, it isn't going to be of much use, and they don't have any green witch then, so what are they going to do? They're weaker than they should be, and they didn't even feel that strong to begin with, because they've all lost their powers and have to do old school witchcraft. So they're debating what to do, and Mrs. Hart, which is what she's still credited as in IMDb, might I add, even though the joke is that her real name is Sharon, no one calls her that. And we get the comedy beat at the end when she's dead, and Agatha says, "Who's Sharon?" Right, which was a funny payoff, right? That was a solid little moment. But she's wandered off on her own, and she ends up getting kind of trapped in a magical quicksand or whatever. And they have to come and get her out of it, and it's just a little beat that's kind of teaching them the lesson just to establish it for the audience, but really make it clear to her especially that one of the rules of the witch road is that you do not stray from the road, because any manner of evils might be waiting for you as soon as you go off path. So okay, right, that establishes that. I will say the direction here, when we were doing this moment of her sinking into the quicksand, you know, it starts off with her handbag, which she makes some joke about how it's from a certain store and you can't have that. I assume a nice fancy store that she's proud that she bought her handbag from. And she starts sinking in. I will say some of the shots felt a bit oddly framed to me as it was cutting around her sinking in. And I think maybe they were going for this idea that she was going out of frame, so you're just seeing like a bit of her head peeking out of the bottom. But I think the effect was kind of lost because it was cutting around so quick that it just felt weird when it cut to it, and it was already kind of like that. I think if it kept returning to the same shot, or if you stayed in the shot long enough to see her go down to that level, it would have been an effective technique. But as it is in the episode, it kind of just feels a bit awkward when it cuts to some of these shots where it feels like the shot's not focusing on anything. It feels like it's just cutting to mostly empty space, and it felt a little bit off to me in terms of the shot. And I don't know if it's necessarily the shot's problem or just something they decide to do in the edit where they're taking like weird bits. Maybe they were missing a shot or something and they had to cut around weirdly. I don't know, but something felt a little bit off to the way that was cut together to me. But yes, and I'm sure everyone who wants to hear about Agatha All Along is here for the technical stuff, which is seems to be what I'm mostly focusing on. Which, you know, is to say that I don't find the characters all that particularly interesting. To varying degrees. Obviously, Agatha's got some zingers here or there, and she's kind of funny with how she doesn't care about people. There's a big conversation that needs to be addressed early on in the episode. Once they're in the house, right? They see the house, they go inside, they can't get back out, there's no doors, handles on the inside, the windows won't open, so they're trapped there. And the running joke is more or less that Mrs. Hart is running around thinking this place is great, and loves that there's wine there, loves that there's nice upholstery, so on and so on. But the big conversation that takes place early on here, I think when they're about to start drinking the wine, or maybe just after they've started, but before they know that they've been poisoned and all the rest of the plot kicks in, is there's a conversation between Teen and Jennifer. And Jennifer, out of the extended cast here, outside of Agatha, is probably the one that I like the most so far. I think more than anything, she just has, like, screen presence. She feels like she's got a lot of personality, and it kind of comes out, especially when she gets to be a bit more expressive or animated. I think in this scene, she gets to sort of have a little bit of a, like, almost some knowing looks towards Teen later on when she's freaking out, when she's trying to make the potion, like, and she starts, like, you know, yelling that she doesn't want to die here. Maybe she just gets a bit more to do, and that's why she gets sort of some more sort of scene-stealing moments. But I've thought her moments versus Lila or Alice, which were a lot more just kind of subdued. They weren't great either, to be fair, though. I'm best of the bunch is basically what I'm saying. Anyway, she's talking to Teen, and this scene, if it isn't a misdirect, is some of the most painful foreshadowing I have ever seen. I was just... So basically, she says to Teen, hey, be careful with Agatha, and Teen sticks up for Agatha and says, oh, she's not as bad as everyone thinks she is. And Jennifer's like, hey, do you know she sacrificed her child to get the Darkhold? She wanted the book and she gave up her only child for it? And Teen's like, no, I don't believe that. That's not possible. And Jennifer gives a bit of a look. But Jennifer then goes on, whilst looking right at Teen. And at this point in the episode, I also point out, they're all aware now that there's some kind of spell on Teen to hide their name, right? That was a whole thing where Teen tries to introduce themselves and the magic goes over the mouth, and they discuss that, oh, some witch has put some kind of thing on Teen, and why? Maybe is because there's something valuable that they know, maybe there's something else, I don't know, but regardless, they're kind of aware of this, right? So this idea of who is Teen as like a big question is really starting to, you know, come up. It's starting to be something that's there, right? It wasn't just something from the first episode that's kind of lingering. It's become a bigger thing now where there's an actual mystery with a big answer potentially as to why this identity is being concealed. So whilst looking right at Teen, Jennifer says Agatha wouldn't even recognize her own son if she saw him today. This has to be a misdirect. Like, if Teen just turns out to be Agatha's child, this scene is so blatant in spelling it out to the audience. I can't believe they're actually just going to do that. Right? It can't be. They can't be thinking of doing that after this scene. Why would you write this scene this way if that's actually where it was going? Yeah, obviously you have to bring up the fact that Agatha gave up her kid, because I didn't remember that from Wandavision. I didn't remember jack shit. So I appreciated Jennifer bringing that up as a point of character, as a point of saying, hey, Agatha can't be trusted. She's kind of an evil bitch. We have to be careful around her. None of us can trust her. And there's moments throughout the rest of the episode where Agatha proves that, where she doesn't want to like drag Mrs. Hart's body. She wants to just leave her for dead. When the house is like being flooded because they're suddenly underwater. When all that stuff's happening, there's multiple times, or she like pretends to drink the wine but doesn't, and is actually safe for a while until they have to force her to also drink the wine so that she's in the same boat as everyone else. So she repeatedly proves throughout the episode that she cannot be trusted, that she's going to slyly kind of snake her way out of anything she can. Right? That's just who the character is, and that's fine. But obviously adding this extra bit of weight of, no, she gave up her child is something that the audience should be thinking about. But to point this out so straight-faced to a teen and say that line, she wouldn't recognize her own son if she met him today, this has to be a misdirect, or, like, I don't think the scene's that great if it is a misdirect, but I think it's much, much worse if it isn't. If Teen ends up being Agatha's child, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to complain. I'm going to moan. I'm going to point back to this scene and say, what were you thinking, writers? Why are you spelling it out this heavily? It's like a neon sign saying, think about the fact that Teen might be Agatha's child. And I think the reason why, even if it is a misdirect, I don't like it, is that it's so blatant that it has to be a misdirect. Right? So the two options here is that Teen does not turn out to be Agatha's child, and I will look back at this and say, well, you were going so hard in this scene to suggest that they might be, that maybe you're it's too forced, it's too much, and it's so obvious that it can be. But if it turns out that they are Agatha's child, then that's not more satisfying. It's not like this, the double bluff isn't a thing that works. You can't go, oh, we're making this thing so obvious that it's actually surprising that we did it. I don't think that works. It's definitely not compelling. So, yeah, okay, I hated that scene. That's basically what all boils down to. I hated this scene. I hated how they basically took a break out of the story of the episode to bring this up. It didn't feel that natural. And what's weird about it is that I think I would have liked it a lot more if it felt like Jennifer was trying to befriend Teen because they actually wanted to look out for him. Like, if Jennifer was doing this out of a really good place, and to an extent, I guess she kind of is, but if it felt like it was the start of a new friendship where Jennifer's going to be this continual, like, presence and force to try and help Teen and be there and be kind of the good witch and or whatever, like, whatever way you want to phrase it. If it felt like the start of a relationship of some kind like that, I would probably be a lot more on board, because it would feel like it has more purpose other than to just raise this big mystery question and kind of like have it dangling so the audience is thinking about it. But because by the end of the scene, it felt like that's all it achieved was this, oh, is Teen Agatha's child that's been long lost through magical means or whatever. I mean, I don't know what the timeline is like here, how long ago that actually happened. I don't think it matters, though, because we're dealing with magic. You know, they can just make up any magic excuse for any timeline shenanigans that we're dealing with here, and it doesn't really matter. So, yeah, hated that scene. It just, the episode just stopped for a 2-minute break to bring this mystery up, and then it just felt so tacked on to everything else, and yeah, the actual content of the scene just felt so blatant either way it turns out. So, did not like that scene. Rest of the plot, what are we doing? They're poisoned. The wine in the house is poisoned with a specific thing that they figure out eventually. Specifically, Jennifer figures it out because she's the potions specialist or whatever. And they need to make an antidote. They need the ingredients for it, so they end up going through the house looking for various things that will technically suffice to these specifications. Like, you know, like, technically, oh, we need something of an old corpse. Oh, technically oil or petroleum counts as that. So, like, they go looking for anything that has that in it. First the car, they don't find it there. They get it from, I don't know, bathroom products instead. Whatever. So, that's kind of what the rest of the episode is, by and large. There's little jokes here or there throughout. There's a whole comedy bit. The first part of the spell the poison, I should say, that lets them know that they've been poisoned is that their face turns into like someone who's had like a shit ton of plastic surgery and they're all swollen and whatnot. And it's okay. I mean, it's whatever. It's all just a bit goofy for the sake of the fun and like it being the first sign that something's wrong. And then that goes away. And then the real thing with the poison is that they're going to start hallucinating and then eventually die, right, after about 30 minutes. And when they start drinking the wine, a 30-minute countdown, like a clock starts ticking down, literally in the scene, so they know something's going to happen. So they're very concerned. and they want to fix it. Like I said, there's a whole thing where Agatha didn't actually drink anything, but they realize that she's not drank anything, and they force her to. And Agatha resists quite quite a bit, but ultimately does so. This does work to an extent in terms of plot structure, though, which I will appreciate, in that everyone else pretty much has their hallucinations at the same time. Not Mrs. Hart. She drank first, so she gets them a little bit early, and she passes out from them because she's so distraught. She actually has an hallucination about Wanda, by the sounds of it, based on what she says. Whereas the others, we get to see their hallucinations, at least in part. We get to see what they're seeing and get a sense of what they're actually going through, but not Mrs. Hart. The others all kind of drank at the same time, so there's a portion when they're all looking for ingredients where they all have hallucinations. Jennifer, Alice, and Lila, and they all are opening up some doors as to their backstory, and like, we're going to delve into some of this. Like, Jennifer sees like an evil doctor with an apron. I'm sure that'll turn into something down the line. Lila sees I don't even know what to call her, like a woman in like a sort of very fancy attire in like an old house, saying they're all going to die. I think she said it was something like that. I don't know. Like, that one was a bit vague. And then Alice was a bit more understandable. It was her mother she sees, and her mother is saying that her grandmother died that day, and she has to be next as she's lighting a lighter. So this idea that all the women in her family are cursed was brought up earlier in the episode, and that she has this tattoo that's meant to ward off evil spells or stuff. So that felt like it was feeding into the mother stuff. It was giving you a sense of her actually, because I understand the purpose of this one for Alice especially, because I feel like she intentionally is very plain-faced. She tries to sort of like not show that she's feeling anything. She's very stoic and very angry looking all the time. And I think the point of her having this hallucination in terms of like an overall narrative is to actually see her get emotional about it. She does have a little moment where she opens up to Teen, but this was a bit more impactful because you actually get to see her kind of like feel like this sort of tearful joy as she sees her mother once again that she's not seen since she was younger, and kind of the fear that her mother's going to die again. Like, there was a lot of like emotion packed in there, and that worked all right actually. The scene with Teen where Alice kind of opens up was a little bit weird because again, I think it was mostly an editing choice that made it feel weird, because the start of the conversation is Teen tries to ask about the tattoo, and Alice just says, "Don't ask about it," or she refuses to answer the question, and it cuts away to something else for like 2 seconds, and then it cuts back to them, and Alice just immediately says, "All right, I got the tattoo in Colorado," and explains the backstory, and she decides to open up. What I thought was weird about it is that if it just stayed in the scene and Alice watched Teen's reaction to like being shot down, and you could see that she felt a little bad that she'd done that, and maybe thought, "Oh, you know what? I'll connect a little bit, right? Maybe I'm being a bit too harsh." I think it would have been fine. It would have made sense to me that she changed her mind and started opening up. But because it cuts away and cuts back, even though it's not that long, it feels like we're missing that beat where you can see that she's changed her mind. So it cuts back to her, and she just starts answering the question she shot down like 30 seconds ago. It was a little bit strange. Again, it's just these little directing and editing quirks that are making moments like that feel a bit off to me, where I'm not really feeling the natural flow of like a character doing something because it's a reaction to something else. So that's just a little thing, but it was there. It did stick out to me. So yeah, they all have their hallucinations, and what I was saying earlier though about Agatha drinking much later than everyone else is that it means her hallucination comes much later than everyone else, and I did actually appreciate that, because I think it came at a more dramatic time. The potion's already brewed, they've figured out what was missing, the blood of the unmagical, so Teen gets cut to give some blood, blah blah blah, they're using the sink as the cauldron, it's whatever. And just as they're about to finish, Agatha gets her hallucination, and she sees or hears a baby crying, and this is tying into her backstory. So this is why it was important to bring up what she did, right? That she gave up her kid for the Darkhold. It was important to bring that up, right? As much as I'm saying that earlier scene felt disconnected from everything else, it did, because it felt like they sort of literally stepped away from the plot for a second to have the conversation, and felt a little bit weird because of that, especially since everything else it was there to imply. But it was important for this moment because she sees the crib, she hears the baby crying, but when she lifts up the blanket, It's the Darkhold that's there instead. Now, admittedly, would this have worked as an interesting tease had we not heard what she did earlier on, if you didn't remember it? Because I assume we kind of knew this from Wandavision and I've just forgotten about it. Maybe, there's an argument. But, you know, because when her hallucination started, I didn't go, oh, wow, of course hers has to happen at the dramatic moment. I felt like, no, this makes sense because she drank much later than everyone else. This was built into how they set everything up. So this was an example of good setup and payoff, was having her have her hallucination at this more prominent time. And she's the main character, so hers should feel more important than everyone else's. So, yeah. Also, at this point, the house is magically underwater, and they drink the potion. It cures them. They forget about Missy's heart, though, and try and pour it in her mouth at the last possible second. And then all the windows start breaking, the water comes flooding in, the oven opens up, and it's like a magical tunnel to leave. So they all go through there, they throw in Missy's heart. Agatha wanted to leave her, but ended up helping when the others insisted, basically. I will say, I did like when they leave the house, there's a moment that's very Goonies, where they're basically going down a slide, and it made me think of the Goonies, and they all kind of like sort of like hit each other as they're sliding down at the bottom. And I thought that was kind of fun. I'm like, oh, if they lean into the adventure idea of this a little bit, I think it might work for me a little bit more. If we go for more of a like a treasure hunt that's maybe I guess fundamentally I'm not a big fan of magic, right? Because it's just an excuse to do things whenever. Like, you know, the house appearing, oh, it's magic. Oh, like, they're given this trial with potions and the poison and whatnot. Oh, it's just, you know, it's magic. The things appeared there, right? And that's just there, right? I think fundamentally I'm just never going to love that, but this idea of more of an adventure kind of vibe to it, I could probably get into that a bit more. But yeah, the end of the episode is the realization that Missy's heart is dead, or I should say Sharon is dead. Who's Sharon is the final line. I kind of like, obviously I don't know what purpose she'd have for the rest of the show, so I could believe that she's dead, but for some reason, it just doesn't feel harsh enough to believe that she's actually dead. Maybe that's just because the tone of the show doesn't feel like it's strong enough to think they'd just kill off this nice older lady. Part of me feels like she's going to turn out to be like the big bad of the Witches Road. Like, she's going to be the Wicked Witch of the West or whatever. Like, obviously we've got Aubrey Plaza, which, by the way, is not in this episode, and I was disappointed once again. Her absence was felt, I will say. But part of me has this weird feeling that because she died so early, that Missy's heart's going to turn out to be the real big bad at the end, somehow. Like, she was never really a sweet old lady. She was always some evil, like, monster witch who wanted revenge on Agatha or something. Like, I don't know, something's just giving me that vibe at the end, based on how she dies. I could be completely wrong. We might never bring her up ever again. Maybe if Agatha has a character arc where she wants to do something good at the end, she'll use some magic to bring her back or something. I don't know. But anywho, that's my thoughts on the episode. I don't have any super deep cut analysis, I don't think. It's not an unpleasant watch, I will say that. It's an easy, breezy time to get through it. I will say, though, that I don't really feel like I'm getting that connected to the character stories, and the plot is playing out in a super kind of just by-the-numbers manner for me, which is making it sort of inherently less interesting as I'm going. But hey, we'll see what episode 4 brings. We'll see if this death has an impact on the characters and what they do next. We'll see if they tease Teen's identity a bit more next time. But that is episode 3 of Agatha All Along. Thank you very much for joining me. You can, of course, tell me what you think of the episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all those things help out a bunch, and you can help out even more by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting all the content with a little bit of money and getting bonus stuff for your efforts. You can also do YouTube membership if that's more your thing. But yeah, go and have a look and see if you want to do it, because I would not be doing all of this as often as I do it without that support. So thank you very much. I will see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?